Good afternoon, everyone, and I really want to thank BSR also for giving me the opportunity to be here and speak with you about my favorite topic, which is water. I'm sure by now most of us have heard the predictions about water, that water is going to be to the 21st century what oil was to the 20th, that water scarcity is going to bring food crises, food shortages, ecological decline, maybe even wars. And I should say that over my 30 years of working on global water issues, I've made some of those predictions myself. But the important thing I want to point out today is that the narrative of that story, the human story we know, is going to be more and more about water. All we have to do is pick up the newspaper to know that. But the narrative of that story is still being written. And it's being written every day by the choices that we make about how we use and manage and value fresh water. And so what I'd like to talk about today is a new model of freshwater restoration and stewardship that builds resilience into these uncertain times that we're moving into, and shows that we can, in fact, if we work together, change the course of our water story in a very, very positive way. We are very lucky to live on a very blue planet, but only 2.5% of that water is fresh water, okay? And 2/3 of that fresh water is locked up in glaciers and ice caps. So less than 1% of all this water on planet Earth is fresh and somewhat accessible to us to make use of. That water is finite, but of course our demands for water are not. They continue to grow and grow. Everything in this room, everything that we use and wear and buy and make, takes water to produce, and sometimes a really surprising amount. And I'm sure many of us have a cotton shirt on today, about 700 gallons of water to make that cotton t-shirt or cotton shirt. Most of that water is consumed in growing the cotton out in the field. Typical hamburger, about, take a guess, 600 gallons of water to make a typical hamburger. That's not including the pickle and the fries. That's about as much water, if you're an average person living in America, that's about as much water as you would use at home in a week, just to make one hamburger. And so then, of course, we have to multiply all of these billions of gallons by billions of consumer purchases and meals across the globe every day, and we can begin to see why we have a water problem. If you think about this global map of water stress, this looked very different when I was starting to work on water issues 30 years ago. This map is getting redder and redder and redder with each passing year. This is showing river basins where the demands for water are sort of bumping up against the limits of that finite supply, watershed after watershed. And you can see here it encompasses most of the Western US, a good bit of Asia, China, India, Pakistan, Central Asia, of course, Northern Africa. So a good bit of the Earth right now that's populated and where we grow our food is in this category we would classify as water stressed. So what's happening in these regions? We see, for example, rivers routinely running dry. Sometimes big rivers. The Nile is pretty much tapped out in Africa. The Yellow River in China, the mother river of China, pretty much tapped out. The Indus River in Pakistan. Here's the Rio Grande in New Mexico. The Murray River in Australia. And of course the Colorado in the southwestern US, which is the lifeline really for the southwestern United States. So these are major rivers that are routinely tapped out, running dry, and presenting water security and sustainability challenges across the board in these watersheds. One of the out of sight, out of mind problems that I've worked on a lot over the years is groundwater. We're hearing a lot about this in California, the fact that during droughts we tend to overpump groundwater as surface water supplies dwindle. But even without the drought situation, at this moment, about 10% of our food production in the world today depends on the overpumping of groundwater, which by definition is an unsustainable use of water. If you look at the major food producing areas, the North Plain of China, the breadbasket of India, northwestern India, of course the western US, the high plains in northwest Texas and Kansas, the Central Valley of California, vast depletion of groundwater to meet current demands. And so in a sense, we're taking tomorrow's water to meet today's demands. And that's a sort of a debt to the future that we're going to have to repay. And it's a bubble in the food economy that we're going to have to reconcile with. So these are significant challenges already. And of course, climate change is going to magnify this. If we think about climate change and how we're going to experience it, it's going to be largely through the water cycle. Changes in rainfall patterns, floods and droughts, melting of glaciers and diminishing snowpack. This is going to affect the global water cycle in very profound ways. And we're beginning, of course, to get a taste of that now. So these are very, very challenging problems. And then you add the climate challenge on top of that. And we are in very much a new normal when it comes to water. The scientists say we're outside what they call stationarity. We can't rely on the past to be a good guide to the future. And so we've got to prepare in very significant ways to become a whole lot more resilient in our use of water. This year, in fact, for the first time, the World Economic Forum in Davos declared water crises as the #1 global risk, the #1 global threat, above weapons of mass destruction, above the spread of infectious diseases. For the first time, water became the #1 threat. So the question is, what do we do? What do we do about this situation? Water is actually much more than the new oil. Water is not only the basis of our economies and essential to everything we do, it's also the basis of life. And so it seems to me if we are talking about building a more water-secure future, we really need to do two things. We need to first figure out how to lead healthy, productive lives and consume less water in the process. We need to shrink our footprint. Second thing we need to do is return some water to the natural environment to deal with this significant depletion of ecosystems. So that's exactly what Change the Course, the initiative I'd like to talk about today, is attempting to do. We are attempting to bring the public and corporations and conservation organizations together to do those very two things: shrink our human footprint and return water to depleted rivers, wetlands, watersheds in need of restoration. As Jeremy mentioned, it was launched about 3 years ago by National Geographic, the Bonneville Environmental Foundation, and participant media. And we've been actively working on piloting this program in the Colorado River Basin, which supplies water to more than 30 million people, 4 million acres of irrigated land, sculpted the Grand Canyon, very iconic American river, but is severely stressed, is severely in need of restoration. Let me talk for a second about the mechanics of Change the Course. They're actually very, very simple. We invite members of the public to engage with us by learning more about their water footprint. We built a tool online at National Geographic, a water footprint calculator that walks you through your daily life, your diet, your energy use, your material purchases, your home water use, to give you your number and invites you to think about your personal water footprint. We encourage people then to make a pledge to do something in your daily life to shrink your water footprint. We promise, Change the Course promises, that for every personal pledge, we will return 1,000 gallons of water to an ecosystem in need, to a depleted river or wetland. And what makes that possible are corporate sponsors that engage with us that also want to balance their water footprint by not just doing more recycling and conservation in their manufacturing sites, in their supply chains, which is of course very, very important, but to go above and beyond that and give some water back. And we help to make that happen. And so basically we take the corporate sponsorships, work with conservation groups on the ground, and find projects that deliver high ecological value per dollar invested. Every project that we do is third-party certified, scientifically sound. We track the gallons, we can measure the gallons, we report the gallons so that businesses basically can get an accounting of the water that they have helped to restore and help achieve their own sustainability goals. As I mentioned, we have been piloting Change the Course in the Colorado River Basin with projects from headwaters all the way down to the headwaters in the Rockies, all the way down to the Delta in Mexico. And with our conservation partners, we have now executed more than a dozen projects that are really making a difference in the Colorado River Basin. Our aim with these projects, and this is very important, our aim with these projects is to show that if we get smarter about how we use and manage water, we can have healthier ecosystems side by side with healthy economies and healthy communities. It's not an either-or situation. And so the projects we select tend to be of that kind, and they're demonstrating that we can, in fact, get smarter about how we use water and increase the value of water. If you have a healthier river as a result of these efforts, you've increased the value of water. The Colorado River Basin is a great place to work because we know we have a $26 billion economy in the Colorado Basin that depends on water staying in rivers rather than diverting it out. A tourism economy, fishing, boating, fly fishing, and so on, depends on water being in those rivers rather than taken out. So a couple examples of our projects. The Verde River is a beautiful desert river in central Arizona. It has one of the most beautiful riverside riparian forests you can find in the Southwest. But it was being depleted severely, is being depleted severely by century-and-a-half-old irrigation ditch systems that farmers are still operating much the way they have for the last 150 years. They take all the water out, put it into the ditch system, and then irrigate the land in the Verde Valley. This has left, in many years, the Verde 5 to 8 miles completely dried up in this beautiful area of Arizona. And so we partnered with the Nature Conservancy in this case, and we're always partnering. Change the Course is a partner of conservation groups. We're rarely the lead on a project of this type. And so the Nature Conservancy we worked with to basically install a solar-powered automated head gate on this ditch system, which allows the irrigators to take just the water that they need, right, and leave the rest for the river. This gentleman, Frank Gamenden, is the ditch boss. He used to get up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, raise the gates manually, never have any idea how much water was coming out, but because the ditch system could hold all the water, they would put all the water in the ditch system and the river got nothing. So with a fairly simple installation of a smart technology, he can now do this from his cell phone, sitting in his living room. The river is healthier, the irrigators are happy, they still have all the water they need, and the productivity of agriculture has maintained the same, but the value of water in the Verde Valley is increased. There's more opportunity for enjoying the river, for birding, for boating, and so on. We communicate with our pledge community. Every time someone makes a pledge, they become part of our pledge community, and the pledge is free. Right? You're pledging to conserve. So we try to communicate with them about these projects and motivate them to bring friends and family and get more engaged themselves through video, through stories. And I'm just going to show you a 30-second video that we developed based on our project in the Verde to let people know what we've done in the Verde, but also to encourage more people to get engaged. So hopefully this will start. 30 seconds. We've also been really pleased to work on the very historic restoration of the Colorado River Delta. which is ongoing now. I'm sure some of you have heard about this. This was a really historic happening that 3 years ago, in this November, the United States and Mexico did something two countries had never done before, which is they came together and agreed to work together to give water back to a river that they share. The Colorado River hasn't reached the sea for most of the last half century. This area of the Delta used to be, before all the dams and the diversions depleted and diverted the river away, used to be one of the planet's great desert aquatic ecosystems. 2 million acres of beautiful wetlands. The great conservationist Aldo Leopold called it a milk and honey wilderness. It was a fabulous ecosystem, completely desiccated because of all the dams and diversions upstream. The US gets about 90% of the Colorado River. Mexico takes the last 10% at the border, diverts it away for their own agriculture. So nothing was left for the Colorado Delta. Due to the brilliance of a coalition of conservationists on both sides of the border, working with US and Mexican officials, they agreed for a 5-year experiment to give some water back to the Delta. And I have to tell you, this was one of the most extraordinary experiences of my lifetime, to actually see in the Delta, to actually see a river come home. It was just an absolutely extraordinary moment. On March 23rd, last year, this is the Morelos Dam, the last dam on the Colorado system. It's right at the US-Mexico border. Those gates came up, and the river, for the first time in a long time, actually moved through the Delta. We were down there sort of tracking the flow. Every day we would go out and sort of find the leading edge of the river. Where is it going to be today? Watch the river sort of reclaim its channel, begin to come back through the Delta. We would see places that had no water one day, then looking like beautiful, beautiful places you'd want to have a picnic dinner a couple days later, just watching the river come back. The social side of this story was completely unforeseen and just an absolutely beautiful story. These kids live in a town called San Luis Rio Colorado, a Delta community in Mexico. These kids had never seen the river that gave their town its name. Hundreds of people came out to celebrate the river, to have parties, picnics, swim, play. I mean, it was an incredible sight to just watch people, welcome their river back. Took about 8 weeks, but a small bit of the Colorado did, in fact, reach the sea. An extraordinary thing I never thought I would see in my lifetime. My first time in the Delta was 20 years ago, and I never thought that we could actually make this happen as a society. Change the Course is now helping to keep the base flows going, the sustaining flows that help the habitats. Remember, the Colorado Delta is on the Pacific Flyway. So the birds and wildlife that are moving through that area depended on these ecosystems that essentially were gone. And so these base flows are helping to bring the habitats back that have emerged since that initial flow, but also the active sites that conservationists are working to plant. So these are like stepping stones of habitat that will allow migratory birds coming through to essentially nest and feed and rest and have places to live while they're moving through that Pacific Flyway. This is a spectacularly biologically rich ecosystem from way back. So we're extremely happy to be playing a supporting role in that restoration. We do communicate with our pledge community at least twice a month with text messages and emails that give tips on conservation, keep them engaged, help people to think about how they can shrink their water footprint, keep them thinking about conservation and doing more with conservation. I'm sure most of you would now get the quiz question on the left correct after my talk this morning. So this is a way we keep communicating and keep on being engaged. We have, at this point, more than 20 corporate partners, corporate sponsors. And I have to say, one of the really interesting and surprising things has been the really creative ways that companies have chosen to engage with us. Coca-Cola, for example, which has been very generous in supporting our restoration projects, also brought in companies within its network, within its corporate network. And so Starwood Hotels has been engaging its guests with Change the Course, using using assets that we help provide where they can engage their guests in their hotel systems. Also, Cinemark, another Coke partner, has been showing a 30-second video like the one I showed you, but about a different project, in more than 100 theaters throughout the Colorado River Basin, encouraging people to take the pledge and text RIVER to 77177. And so we keep that engagement going. Waste Management, this year, which is a major sponsor, the major sponsor of the Phoenix Open, initiated as part of its theme for the day, Life Without Water is Awkward, and Change the Course worked with them on that, reaching in some way 500,000 people. The National Hockey League extended its Gallons for Goals project with us, encouraging its fans to text NHL 77177. So this is a way that companies are engaging with their stakeholders, with their fans, with their customers, again, in ways that we didn't really expect when we first launched this. There's been a tremendous amount of creativity. So where are we? I'm nearly up on my time. Here's where we are. We're really about building this movement of water stewardship. At this point, we have about 133,000 people in our pledge community. As I said, more than 20 corporate sponsors, 16 restoration projects completed with more in the pipeline, and about 4 billion gallons of water restored in ecosystems throughout the Colorado River Basin. That is literally a drop in the bucket of what's needed, but it's made a difference in those rivers in which we've worked. We know that the pilot has worked in the Colorado River Basin, so we're now getting ready to expand out to other geographies, other river basins. We're looking at projects already in California, Texas, Georgia, and elsewhere. There's no reason this can't go international eventually. So we're very excited about the potential for Change the Course. And we really hope that as you have ideas, you'll come to us, share your ideas with us. This is all about replication, and we know it's scalable. And so we're going to need that kind of partnership and support to really take this to its full level. My colleague Val Fishman from Bonneville Environmental Foundation is here with me. We've worked together closely on this, and we'd be more than happy to talk more about this with you. I really do think river by river, we can rewrite this human water story and really build a more secure water future. So thank you very much for your attention.